What up, Buffalo fanatics, Z-Bots, Z here with you live. No, not again. Come on. Man, every time I go live, my internet lags out. What's this? Z-Bot, you gotta start using NordVPN for your streams. It will help speed up your internet. 2-year plan is 70% off at the bfvpn.com, and you get your first month free. Kingpin knows best. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Z-Bot back with you with better than ever internet connection thanks to NordVPN. The best live streams use the best internet connection. Visit the bfpn.com to take advantage of 70% off a 2-year plan with your first month free.
Kingpin, and you're listening to the Air Raid Hour, a Buffalo Fanatics video experience.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined, as always, by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. You can see we got this nice new color scheme to go along with our new sponsor here at NordVPN. So since they're blue, we decided that we would make the transition to blue. Looks better in some of the promotions that we make for social media as well. But before we get started tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it's back. Football is back.
Before we get
kicked out of what was that old commercial, like football on your phone, like they used to have like a song to it. Back in the day.
Was it like a Verizon commercial or something?
Yeah,
like,
it was something.
Verizon used to have that partnership with like the NFL app or something back when like smartphones were first coming. I remember that.
I was going to start the show with the Eminem Guess Who's Back again. Guess who's back? Tell a friend. Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? It's the National Football League, baby. After months of nothingness since the draft, we finally got some real football back for you, and we got a whole bunch of people in the comment section, and we could just tell from the last couple of shows, man, like the excitement level is through the roof for the Buffalo Bills, and Touchdown Jesus is bringing out the best of Bills Mafia. But we got Jose Gonzalez coming in saying, finally catching y'all live. And the comment section was just lighting up before the show even started with D Handsome, Don Keith, Jessica Tennis, Carl, AK Cash, Buff Barrier, Bobby's in the building, Pierre's in the building. I don't know if I said D Handsome. I think I might have. King Thriller's in the house. Chris S., Alex McLean, Travis Sinnett, Hulk Tommy Blatt. I've never seen that one before. That one's interesting. Namdi's in the house as well. Colin Kuko, a whole bunch. Jason Sugg, a whole bunch of people, and I apologize.
Andre Lobb, Carl Hanratty, aka Randy, which we finally just got him to like not worry about that anymore. I will say this: this is kind of random. Does anyone else have this issue where their strings come out of their hoodies?
Yeah.
In the laundry, and you have to like weave them back in. Like I've become so good at putting this thing back through.
There's a trick to it.
What I'm gonna do,
a coat hanger or something.
Well, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start tying this together when I wash it.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, but you're saying use a coat hanger if you have to feed it back through. Okay, yeah. I like that idea.
Yeah, that's what my wife tells me. I have yet to try it. I just wear my hoodies without the strings once they fall out. Jason Sugg coming in saying breaking. Najee Harris has 21 yards on 7 carries. I know that they're playing a lot of backups tonight, but man, that Pittsburgh offensive line, woof. Like the quarterback, I know again it was some backups, it was Mason Rudolph, but that offensive line, it appears like, is once again primed to have a quarterback who is going to hold onto the ball for about 1 second. And you're not going to have to worry about a lot of downfield stuff from the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. I mean, our guy Kendrick Green was starting at center, even though at least on the R-Lads depth chart, he was the backup center and no other starters were playing. So he might be the second team center. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, it'll be really, really interesting to see. And I had Greg Vorse on a couple of weeks ago when I was filling in for Rico. And I said, what's something that you want to see this season? Or like, what's a hot take you have? And he's like, I absolutely want to steamroll the Pittsburgh Steelers week 1. Like, that team is a house of cards. The Buffalo Bills are legit. Let's go out and let's send a message the first week of the National Football League season and, lay a 40 burger on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this team is capable of doing that, especially the way that we've been rolling in practice. What are your thoughts on that first game against Pittsburgh, getting to see them live tonight?
Well, I will say is there's no reason that the Bills shouldn't win that game. I mean, the last 2 times we played them have been prime time, Sunday night games. Obviously in 19, we were kind of the up and coming. And last year, they had that sort of record, as you described, which was really a house of cards, if you think about it, right? They went, the longest of any team before losing a game. And all throughout the year, people were saying, like, this is a facade. They haven't beaten anybody. Like, their best win was against the Ravens or the Titans. And it was just one of those things you felt like the team has some nice players, but collectively they didn't feel like as good as their record was showing. Now, I know the old adage is you are what your record says you are, but that Steelers team really wasn't as good, I think, as the record showed. And look, we came out in the first half of that game last year and kind of, we weren't sharp, but we turned it on in the second half. And now 2 times in a row, we've beaten them. And I will say, throughout the drought years, the Steelers had really had our number anytime we played them. We didn't play them that often, but they had our number for the most part during those drought years. We obviously know about the situation where the end of that one season where we only had to beat their backups and we didn't. Willie Parker on the scene. Don't remind me, UNC. My point is that the Bills are ready now to put any kind of demons behind them when it comes to the Steelers. They've beaten them 2 times in a row, and they need to show that they're in a class above, and they're ready to, not be the team that's like, oh, well, we're the team that could beat the Steelers. Like, the Steelers are the team that, like, has to worry about us now, right? So week 1, you got to set the tone, come out and blow them out. But honestly, let's be real. As long as we win, I think we're probably all going to be pretty happy about that.
Yeah, we got Jessica Tennis coming in saying, I think it's funny that neither of you guys live in upstate New York any longer, as she doesn't as well. Yeah, I mean, but that's Bills Mafia, right? Like, that's one of the things that really got me through 5 years ago, transitioning to a move out west, is the Bills Mafia community on social media, places like Twitter and stuff. I still feel like I'm home, even though I'm not home, listening to Pat Moran and his Chicken Wing podcast and seeing what the boys over at Trainwreck are up to. And then obviously getting to talk Buffalo Bills football with the people here at Buffalo Fanatics. So it's just an awesome community that we have here for the Buffalo Bills, and you're never too far away from home. And it reminds me too, I mentioned I'm a teacher. My first day of school, kid shows up in a Josh Allen jersey, right? I have an update to the story. And it was a great story. It was fun while it lasted. Day 1, kid wears a Josh Allen jersey.
Oh no, I know where this is going.
Day 2, kid wears a Tremaine Edmonds jersey.
Oh.
Day 3, kid wears a Josh Allen red throwback. And I'm sitting here like, do I have an illegitimate son out there somewhere? Like, what is happening right now? Like, this kid 3 days in a row is straight up wearing a Bills jersey. You know what he walks in wearing today?
Kyler Murray.
No, Baker Mayfield.
Oh.
What? I looked at him. I was like, what? What are you doing? And he didn't even say anything. He just like shook his head at me. He's like, what do you want from me? And I'm like, dude, you can't just wear a Baker Mayfield jersey.
Is that like the equivalent of a certain someone wearing a Cam Newton Patriots jersey?
No comment. No.
Look,
comment.
but like, I will say this. I have a young nephew. He's like 12 years old. He's really into football. He's a Packers fan, but he plays the games on his tablets. He plays the Madden game on his tablet. They play the Ultimate Team where you collect the cards. I gave up on that, but like, he likes individual players as well, right? So
yeah,
look, if you are a Bills fan, and okay, maybe he likes Baker Mayfield, right? As a player, like I love Julio Jones. Like I mean, I don't know that I'd ever get his jersey, but there are certain guys that like aren't
Mhm.
Bills that I've always really liked. So maybe that's him with Baker. I don't know.
All right, let's get into it now, ladies and gentlemen. And the topic of today's show is we want to start breaking down and defining the potential roles of players on the 2021 offense. And what sort of made me come up with this idea for today's show, or us come up with the idea for today's show, because I text you, I'm like, yeah, I got nothing for today. And then we finally settled upon this. And it's because the Bills didn't have practice yesterday. And we usually like to hash out our idea before the morning of or the night before. And there was nothing really to go off of. Yeah, and Chris is spot on there with the fantasy football comment. But Isaiah McKenzie and Jake Kumerow have been blowing up the newsfeed the last couple of days. Obviously, Jake Kumerow was a fast riser in the early days of training camp. We said, hey, let's wait until the pads go on before we make any judgments. And then sure enough, the pads go on, and Matt Perino and Sal Capaccio are both tweeting today about how he's beating Trey White on one-on-ones. How he is deceptively fast and, getting open over the middle of the football field and doing all these different things, and this guy is not just a flash in the pan. You also had Perino early on when the pads were on saying things like Isaiah McKenzie, this is the best he's ever looked. Brian Dable goes and in his press conference is asked about Isaiah McKenzie. And I don't know if you saw that clip of Brian Dable talking about Isaiah McKenzie, but the guy looked so hard like he was trying to keep himself from smiling, talking about Isaiah McKenzie. And he didn't I think he knows that Isaiah McKenzie is one of those players who's like uber confident in himself and loves it when people like say nice things about him and stuff. Like, he loves that limelight. Like, he tried to get up there and talk with the media for like 2 hours today. He loves it. Like, he feeds off that stuff. And Brian Dable was like, I don't want to say anything too nice about him because I don't want his ego to get too big. But you could tell Brian Dable wanted to say nice things about him. And then on top of that, Heath Barrowell comes in and is just like, yeah, he's far and away the lead dog in this kick return or primary return man race, punt return as well. So it seems like if the Buffalo Bills, as of today, were to keep 6 wide receivers, it would be Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, and Jake Kumerow. Let's start with Kumerow. People are saying some things about Jake Kumerow. Obviously, there was the Aaron Rodgers stuff we talked about. We hit on last show how Aaron Rodgers said he was the second best wide receiver at the Packers camp last year, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's a wide receiver 2 in this league. People are expecting some big things from Jake Kumerow because he's putting up big numbers in practice. But I don't think people realize there's only so many balls to go around. The role that Jake Kumerow played in the Denver Broncos game, where he was on the field for like 5 or 6 snaps and played for all 4 phases of special teams, that seems to be like, that would be his role even if he made this football team. Am I correct here? He would just maybe do it for all 16 games instead of like 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% correct. Barring injury, he's not going to really have a huge role when it comes to the actual offense, other than maybe, you put him in some 2-minute situations for his height, down near the end zone, like stuff like that, right? But as far as a consistent role on offense, not with those other 4 you mentioned, right? And on top of the fact is, Isaiah McKenzie, right? He's going to look like he's going to carve out a role because arrow's pointing way up on him, looking at the best he ever has in camp per all the reports. Obviously, going to have the punt return, kick return duties. At least he's in the lead for it right now. So if you say those top 4, like you mentioned, maybe Isaiah McKenzie has another role that, and Rob Quinn from Cover One wrote the article about how, he's wanting to prove that he's more than just a gadget guy. Maybe that comes true this year. So what does that leave Jake Kumerow? It leaves him with a very limited opportunity when it comes to the actual offense, right? He's going to have that one game where he catches, like you said, like the 20-yard touchdown, and he's going to play on special teams. So I think a couple people have mentioned, I think Carl and a few others have mentioned, it is still camp and it is still a little bit of hype, but you can't ignore it once it becomes a trend, I think, right? And it doesn't even mean he's going to make the team necessarily. It's just that he's had a great start to camp, and it's been more than, one practice in a row now, right? It wasn't just one flashy play. It's been kind of consistent now throughout the practices so far, a week in. So we can't ignore it, but I also think there's some semblance of like, we gotta just like remember there's a long way to go. There's preseason games, and it's great that he's doing well. But there's still a long way to go before cut down day.
Yeah, I mean, Claude Puig comes in here, and obviously we're talking about Isaiah McKenzie right now, or I'm sorry, Jay Kumerow right now, and we're going to get to Isaiah McKenzie in a second, but he says Isaiah McKenzie may be our slot receiver of the future. At what point do the Buffalo Bills have to start taking the future into consideration when they're looking at the bottom half of this wide receiver depth chart? And in terms of Jay Kumerow, the guy behind him for that 6 wide receiver role would more than likely be a similar type of receiver in the bigger bodied Isaiah Hodgins. What does Isaiah Hodgins have to do to get ahead of Jay Kumerow at this point? Is it him having to put up and shut up in these preseason games? And it almost seems like maybe Isaiah Hodgins has maxed out what he can do in practice, because Kumerow is getting the role with the ones here. And it is a guy like Isaiah Hodgins who stuck with the 2. Is a guy like Hodgins going to have to blow it up in the preseason in order to get those snaps with the ones in practice?
I mean, he's gonna have to keep making a couple of those splash plays that we saw, the bomb over Jackson, right? A couple days ago, and the last week, beginning of this week, and he's going to have to do something in the preseason, right? He's going to have to show it with real reps, whether that's with Trubisky, most likely, or Fromm. Like those are the guys that are going to be throwing him the ball in the preseason, and he's going to have to be one of those guys that you look at, and like a Cedric Wilson tonight for Dallas, right? Where it's like he's the guy that's kind of like the 5th or 6th guy, but he's like making the most of his opportunity in the preseason game. And he's catching everything that comes his way. He's holding on to the ball. He might also have to contribute on special teams. He's going to have to be a red zone type of guy as well. So he's going to have to show that he can do pretty much everything Jake Kumerow is doing and some. The one thing I would say is that what he has as an advantage, and whether or not we, consciously think about this, the Bills did draft him and they did stash him on the IR for a year. They have invested time and resources on him. So, and I'm not saying they didn't for Kumerow, because they've obviously had him on the team last year and brought him back, but a guy that was drafted to me will always have a little bit of more intrinsic value to your team, unless, of course, the team feels like it's just not enough. And we saw that happen with a guy like Voshon Joseph, last year. So he does have to basically do what Kumerow is doing and more, I would say.
We have a great comment here from Jessica Tennis as well, too, saying, she could see Gabe Davis and Jay Kumerow blocking for Stephon Diggs, or even blocking in the run game when they go into like 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. So I think Kumerow probably has a leg up on Isaiah Hodgins, probably as a run blocker. And I know that that's probably like weird to talk about when you're talking about wide receivers, but that is something that a lot of coaching staffs like to see from their wide receivers, is a willingness blocking. So that's something to also look for from Isaiah Hodgins in the preseason, is how willing is he to get scrappy and get blocking when the Buffalo Bills are running the football, when he's not getting the football. So that'll be something interesting to watch. All right, Isaiah McKenzie. This is another tough one, because the question I want to ask you is, Heath Farrell says like, oh, he's always had in him, like the touchdown last year helped him with his confidence. Now that Andre Roberts is gone, Isaiah McKenzie's ready to take off as a kick returner. We could talk about the implications on Marquez Stevenson in a second, but other people are just saying how much better Isaiah McKenzie's gotten as a receiver. And Isaiah McKenzie is a really good example of just development, right? Like a guy that you brought in off of another team's practice squad. He's been here for 3 years, and man, is this investment, this time you've put into this player, really turning into something. But this is a guy who scored 8 touchdowns last year as the wide receiver number 5. So my next question to you kind of sounds silly, but is there any possible way for Isaiah McKenzie to have a bigger role in this offense next season, or this season, barring injury?
On the offense, maybe marginally. Overall, when it comes to contributing to the team, for sure, with his kick and punt return ability, right? So if you want to combine kind of kick, punt return, and offense sort of into one package, then yeah, the role is bigger. Now, on offense, if he's proven that he can do more than just kind of be a jet sweep type guy, or kind of be like the gadget guy that we keep saying, if he can really be like a slot guy, or if he can really be more of a complete receiver, maybe the Bills can mix in some different types of packages, right? Where maybe they have a situation where they go 4 wide and they do like a double slot with like McKenzie on one slot and Beasley on another slot. Like, I have no idea what Dable's crafting up in that regard, but who knows? Maybe something like that could be an interesting type of package where you put like, Diggs and Sanders or Diggs and Davis on the outside. And also, let's not, forget, Cole Beasley's older. Emmanuel Sanders is older. We saw Cole Beasley get dinged up a little bit last year. Obviously, he played through it. Sanders is dinged up already with the foot injury in camp now. So if he's fresh and he's healthy, he might have more opportunities. And I'm not saying that these guys aren't going to be healthy, like Beasley and Sanders aren't going to be healthy, but maybe those guys don't play as many snaps as originally planned, and gives a guy like McKenzie a shot, more of a shot. But again, they paid Sanders $6 million. He's going to be in there. They obviously invested in Gabe Davis. He's probably not going to lose a ton of reps to McKenzie, but marginally, yes, more of a contribution. But like you said with Kumerow, there's only so much to go around, only so many balls to go around.
Yeah, and Bobby coming in saying it's amazing how the beat reporters have hyped up Kumerow, and that's a good point too. I'm not trying to knock anyone here, but that's the thing with these practices. Like, they're not, as Bobby comes in and says, they're not talent evaluators. We're taking the word of other people for the most part on what's going on in training camp. This is all like very much secondary information that we are utilizing here. This is not coming from the coach's mouth. This is not coming from like a trained NFL scout's mouth. This is coming from, newspaper guys or media guys. But that being said, despite the fact that they're hyping up Jake Kumerow, because Jake Kumerow, they're hyping him up for a reason. Like, he's standing out. He's making plays at practice. He's making the most of his opportunities. And on top of that, the fact that he's the one getting the run with the ones when guys like Stephon Diggs are getting their rest day, and when Cole Beasley is getting their rest day, and Emmanuel Sanders gets their rest day, that I think that goes to tell you that it's Josh Allen throwing him the ball a lot. That goes to tell you that the coaching staff probably agrees with probably the beat reporter's assessment that Jake Kumerow is the one earning it at this point. But as someone just came in and said, Chris Jenke, that's what preseason's for. And that's why, we got to wait for some of these games before we can truly start to make an honest assessment. Because what if Hodgins and Stevenson come into and they play awesome in the preseason? Then what kind of decision are you going to make? A couple of years ago, we drafted Darryl Johnson in the 7th round. And we were like, all right, this guy is a project. We are going to put him on the practice squad, book it. And what does Darryl Johnson come out and do in the preseason? He had 2-3 sacks. Like, he was
2 in one game, I think, if I remember.
He was a maniac. We couldn't cut him because of the way he performed in the preseason. There was no way in hell we could cut him and sneak him onto a practice squad. Who's to say Isaiah Hodgins or Marquez Stevenson don't do that? Maybe Jake Kumerow practices better and Isaiah Hodgins plays better. And because one of them is younger, because one of them has more term on their contract, because one of them, Isaiah Hodgins, is the guy the Buffalo Bills invested a draft pick in, tie goes to that. All right, well, he played better in the games, and he did this, so we're going to put him on the roster because we like his future potential more. And then obviously all the jokes come in and all the speculation comes in that we're going to trade Jake Kumerow to the Green Bay Packers for a 7th round draft pick. Because
let me ask you this question. The fact that there's only 3 preseason games instead of 4 for a battle like this, let's say for like the last couple wide receiver spots, or maybe even just the last single wide receiver spot, is the fact that there's only 3 preseason games going to like make that decision easier or harder, you think, for the coaching staff? Are they more likely to throw like Hodgins out there for more snaps than maybe they would have otherwise if there was a 4th game? Same for Stevenson. Like, what's that? What do you expect that dynamic to be as far as like their playing time?
I think Sanders, Diggs, and Beasley will see like 10 snaps all preseason. I don't expect them to see much work this preseason. I wouldn't be surprised if the first preseason game, Josh Allen came out throwing to like on the first series, like Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders. And then in the second series, it was Kumerow, Davis, and McKenzie. Like, it really wouldn't surprise me if a majority of the preseason snaps went to the younger guys like Gabriel Davis, Jake Kumerow, Isaiah McKenzie, Marquez Stevenson. I think there's going to be plenty of snaps. Tanner Gentry, even. There's going to be Isaiah Hodgins. There's going to be plenty of reps to go around for these younger guys. And I wouldn't even be surprised if some of those guys like Hodgins and Stevenson get mixed in with Josh Allen once the actual gameplay opportunities start. Or it's actually nice to have a really good backup quarterback in Mitch Trubisky now, so you can properly evaluate your backups. So that's also fun. And Bobby had a comment here, and he says, remember all the training camp standouts at wide receiver we had? You got to try to remember all the names now, and then people are coming in having a good time, mentioning names like Rod Streeter, Brandon Riley. I think Rick Rogers was thrown in there.
Oh, yeah. You were a big Brandon Riley guy. I remember that.
I was a big Brandon Riley guy. But that's just because our receivers were so awful. I was like, just take the shot. Like, I didn't care. But here's the thing, though. Was Brandon Riley and Rick Rogers and Rod Streeter were playing in the fourth quarter of preseason games. They weren't taking snaps with the starting quarterback, like in practice. So we all love those guys because of either their hype. David Sills is another one.
Yeah, David Sills. Yeah, for sure.
What a steal that guy was, and Duke Williams. But it's like those guys made their mark based off of things they did before they were a Buffalo Bill or things they did against third and fourth stringers. Jake Kumerow is going out there, and Isaiah McKenzie is going out there too, and they're making their mark against the ones in practice. They are running with the ones. Des Lewis, another one. These guys never got their shot with the ones, and Kumerow is getting that shot with the ones. So I think there's something to it. I think there's something to this Jake Kumerow hype. But again,
the report was he caught a bomb over Trey White, right? That's what Perino reported.
Yeah, and the one-on-ones. So, yeah. But the thing is, it's like at the end of the day, even if this hype is real, the hype is he's a 5 to 10 snap a game wide receiver who plays 4 phases of special teams.
Right. Like I don't think people are.
That's the hype. That's the hype.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't expect this guy to come out and be like a 1,000.
Chris Jakey just dropped a Felton Huggins on us. Wow.
Oh, that's
a throwback. I love Jeremy McDaniel back in the day. I was a big
Drew Haddad. Remember him?
Oh yeah. I got Drew Haddad's nameplate. I got him and Naaman. Anyway. All right, let's transition now to the starting wide receivers because there were some interesting comments from Brian Dable this week. He was talking about Gabriel Davis, and he said, I just love Gabriel Davis's versatility. You can throw him out there anywhere. You know, if Diggs has a rest day, you can throw him at the X. If Sanders having a rest day, you can throw him at the Z or the flanker spot. Beasley's having a rest day, you can throw him in the slot. Mm-hmm. The Buffalo Bills seem to be content or fine with not rushing this dude onto the football field. From everything we're hearing in training camp, the big three are going to be Diggs, Sanders, and Beasley. The Buffalo Bills are all in with these veteran receivers to go to the Super Bowl, and they're fine just sprinkling Gabriel Davis in wherever he fits and finding a niche for him, maybe like that big slot role he played early in the season. And there's some positives to that. Like you can make the argument that Gabriel Davis's stats when John Brown wasn't in the lineup weren't as good as when he was in the lineup because he wasn't focused on as much. But there are other arguments you want to make where you're like, man, it's the second year. I want to see if he can step up and be more than just that fourth niche receiver. What are your thoughts on how it looks like the Buffalo Bills are going to be using Gabriel Davis? Do you think that they should be trying to involve him more in the offense, or are you content letting him be that wide receiver number 4?
I mean, I think it's fine for him to be wide receiver 4. I'm said this a number of times, right? As far as expectations for Davis, like I think if he has a similar statistical year as he did a year ago, I would be okay with it. It's just, you know, his contributions last year as a rookie, I think they were very unexpected, right? I don't think anyone really thought he would be as good as he was as a rookie. So you have to take that into consideration too. Like he came along really quickly, and I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. They paid Emmanuel Sanders $6 million to come in and be that veteran guy that matches the attitude of Diggs, that matches the attitude of Beasley. Those three will be the primary three throughout the season. That does not mean there's not a role for Gabriel Davis. I think they can still sprinkle him in the big slot if they want to go that route. They can obviously use him in 4 wide receiver sets, which they did plenty last year. So look, I mean, I wouldn't say that he's going to, I can't sit here and say that he's going to get more snaps than he got last year, because I think last year he actually got probably more than we thought he was going to get as a rookie, a lot more. So even if he's kind of level to what he was a year ago, I still think that's really pretty great for him as a second-year player.
Yeah, and we got a couple people, Ombre Lob, checking in, saying, "What's up, boys?" So nice to have Ombre Lob back in the chat, and somebody else made a comment too. Where was it? Where they said, "Oh, the best, the best big three of wide receivers we have ever had." I think it could be up there with some of the better, like the best trio of wide receivers that the Buffalo Bills have had in a long time. And if you'll notice, people on social media, the social media people at certain different organizations have realized one of the things they can do to get clicks is to trigger Bills Mafia. And one of the things that they are going for the last couple of weeks, I've noticed it. They go there with obviously the Josh Allen stuff. They go there with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, leaving them off of lists like best safety, even when it's duos.
Trey White's a popular one to leave off corner lists.
Yeah. And now they're at it with the wide receiver trios or the wide receiver rooms. They're like,
here it is.
Are they? Yeah, it's and it's bad. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the Bucs receivers. I'm not knocking the Chiefs receivers. I'm not knocking the Cowboys receivers. But I think it was BF Gridiron that says name a better trio, and it was Tyler Boyd, it was T Higgins, and it was freaking their first round pick, Jamar Chase. Like, are you kidding me? Like, come on.
I will say though, the Cowboys trio is pretty nice,
it's
right?
Really
Gallup, Cooper, and Lamb. Like that's better.
And Cedric Wilson's a really good wide receiver, number 4 too. He's made some plays in this preseason game. We've just been watching. I've liked Cedric Wilson his entire career. Noah Brown's a really good special teamer for them. But the Bucs have obviously top heavy with Mike Evans and Godwin, and then they have obviously Antonio Brown, and then they have Scotty Miller, and then they also have Tyler Johnson. So they got some good ones. The Chiefs, what happened? I honestly, off the top of my head, can't name you the Chiefs wide receiving core right now. I know it's.
I would assume it's Hill, Robinson, and Hardman, right? It's those three.
There has to be a fourth in there. I think they drafted someone. For the life of me, I'm losing my mind. I can't think of it, but I wouldn't put the Chiefs wide receiver core over our wide receiver core. Like, in what world?
I mean,
are you counting Travis Kelce because you weren't in the graphic?
No, the reason the Chiefs. Yeah, it gets skewed because the Chiefs have like what in theory should be a superstar at each level of their offense, right? They've got Kelce, they got Hill, and they have Edwards-Helaire. And that's why I think a lot of times the Bills don't get mentioned in the same breath as the Chiefs, even though the Bills wide receivers top to bottom are better, because they don't have that sort of elite trio at each position, right? They have an elite group of wide receivers top to bottom, but like the running backs are kind of like, okay, it's Singletary and Moss, and then the tight end is like pretty much absent, right? So I think that's a lot of times why the Bills offense gets overlooked. But I would agree, the receiver room top to bottom for the Bills is better.
Yeah, and a couple people come in. A number of people have said Byron Pringle, who is again like a guy who pops as a receiver, but is mostly a special teamer. And then here was the draft pick, Cornell Powell.
Oh yeah, Cornell Powell. That's right.
He's a guy who could make some noise in that Kansas City Chiefs with how many players they have and how they space guys out. He's a guy who could make some noise, but still wouldn't put him over the Buffalo Bills just because they drafted Cornell Powell. So that should be super interesting. All right, let's transition now to tight end. And I need to get your reaction. First play of training camp, Dawson Knox drop. Then you see him make that really nice touchdown catch from Josh Allen in that Saturday practice, that really tough catch. And then he has another key drop today. And the key drop, the interesting thing here was the pass was from Mitch Trubisky. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute and whether we should read into that or not. But he had another big key touchdown drop today. And the story out of training camp is the same. Dude catches the hard ones and he drops the easy ones. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Dawson Knox through the first 2 weeks of training camp here?
Yeah, apparently that drop today, he was like had beat two guys and it was wide open and he just freaking dropped it. It's basically more of the same of what we've seen from him his first two seasons, right? I mean, the inconsistency drives you crazy. The splash plays give you hope, and you just hope that he can, over time, as he gets more experience, more playing time, more comfortable in the NFL, that he leaves some of that inconsistency behind, right? And unfortunately, it looks like that hasn't happened yet, at least through a week of camp. Buff Barrier here says Knox had the easiest catch ever and dropped at the end of camp. I think that's the one maybe that I was talking about. He's still developing. Yep, I know. I get it. the tight end position takes a while. We've seen very high round draft picks, first round draft picks not really contribute much until like second, third, even fourth year sometime. But in practice, you'd like to see a little more consistency. He's getting opportunities in practice. Catching the ball from Trubisky, that's an interesting one, right? Because Hollister was only back for individual work today. So Knox should have been the de facto number one, but it could be that they're shallow at the position. I mean, I know they got Becker, your guy, they brought in Bug Howard, but like maybe it's just like, who knows? Like maybe it was just a random rep or two that he was taking with Trubisky. The inconsistency is still there, right? We need to see. I mean, he's going to get some run in the preseason, I think, right? And Pierre's right. It is a confidence thing. Everyone wanted to hype up this tight end or whatever, and everyone wanted to talk about how he worked with George Kittle. And like, the fact of the matter is, if you're not confident as a receiver or as someone tight end, whatever, someone that's got to catch the football, it doesn't matter how talented you are. Once that confidence is gone, it's like in golf, man. When you lose that confidence in your golf swing, like, it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, you're just not going to hit the ball well. So it's the same type of thing. Yeah, we're talking about practice, but that practice translates into the games, right? Does it not in most cases? So inconsistency in practice would tend to lead you to believe that inconsistency will show itself in the games as well. It's all mental. Yeah, I mean, I think most people are making great comments about this. It's a mental thing for him at this point. It has to be.
Yeah, and Truth the Heart's coming in saying feed him in the preseason, get him a lot of targets and get that confidence up. So that's something you might see. Like, of all the starters, finger quote starters, Dawson Knox might get the most run in the preseason of anyone. And we've had this conversation on the show, so I'm not going to dig too much into it. But we've talked on the show about how it's kind of okay if Knox struggles to a degree, because you don't think that Dawson Knox's role this season is going to expand too much. We've talked about the show how he just needs to take advantage of the limited targets he's going to get, just like any tight end on this team needs to take advantage of the limited tight ends or the limited targets they're going to get. So if Dawson Knox and the tight end position as a whole, he's getting limited targets. If we get into the regular season and he starts not taking advantage of those limited targets because he's got cases of the dropsies, since the tight end isn't the biggest part in the world to this offseason or to this offense, do you finally see a guy like, and I'm trying to watch the football game while also talking, it's throwing me off so much. Do you see a guy like Jacob Hollister sliding in there because he's a guy and you can trust to just work the middle of the field, catch the football, be where he needs to be, block? Yeah,
I mean, he will. He will do what Tyler Kroft did last year for this team, and maybe even a little more, right? I think Hollister versus Kroft, I would say Hollister is probably a little bit more of a complete player. I mean, he's got maybe a little bit more upside than a Kroft, but I mean, Kroft, for all to his credit, was pretty reliable last year when he was playing. So I could see him filling that Tyler Kroft role. I also don't think that means Dawson Knox is completely phased out. The Bills won't do that. He will still get his opportunities, but instead of, building on that target share he had last year, where I think he had around like 35, 45 targets, he's not going to build on that, right? It's going to be around the same. Carl says Tommy Sweeney was sliding there.
He said this facetiously. So I want to ask you seriously, does Tommy Sweeney have a legitimate opportunity with, if Knox is the dropsies and Hollister just came back from injury, and obviously what Hollister's ceiling is, does Tommy Sweeney have a chance here? Whoa, someone from Pittsburgh is making a big play here. Anyway, does Tommy Sweeney have an opportunity, even if he's not like the long-term solution at tight end, to maybe this season just be that solid guy who fills that role? Could he usurp everyone in that tight end room?
Could he? Maybe. Is it likely? No. I think even with all of Knox's struggles, I just don't see him overtaking Knox. The Bills are not gonna. The Bills, for their credit, they're a little bit stubborn, right, with some of their draft picks, right? They've been dancing around the Cody Ford situation. He seems to kind of maybe be putting it together like, oh, he can play both guard spots. He can play. They're never really super definitive on that stuff with some of these draft picks. So I think they're going to be protective of Knox in a sense where they're going to give him chances. I also think the fact of the matter is they didn't invest huge in the tight end position in the offseason, which leads me to believe that they're willing to just go out with like throw Knox out there and see what he can do. So can it happen? Yes. Is it likely? No. But I am rooting for Tommy Sweeney just as a guy and as a fan of his. And
Chris S comes in and says, if Knox wasn't a draft pick, would we be giving him as much rope? I think as fans, I think we'd be giving him more rope. If he was a UDFA and had all this raw potential, because if you look at that tight end room, it is a bunch of guys who are like, I hope he can be a TE2. I hope he can be a TE3. And then there's Dawson Knox, who stands at 6'5", 240 pounds. He has the athletic ability of some of the upper echelon tight ends in the National Football League. Like physically, he's that gifted. He just hasn't put it together because he doesn't have the experience playing tight end in high school, and he played in a very vanilla scheme in college, etc. Like whatever you want to say, he wasn't the most seasoned guy when we drafted him in the 3rd round. So if he was a 6th or a 7th round pick, or he was a UDFA, fans would probably be screaming a hell of a lot more. Be patient, give him time, etc., etc. I think more so than they are now. I think his draft stock makes people less patient with him.
And let's not forget, we also traded up for him. It wasn't just a pick in the 3rd round. They traded up to sneak into the end of that day 2 and get him. So they obviously saw something in him. Yeah. CR says, example, Logan Thomas is now killing it, I think, kicking it in Washington as a tight end. He took a few years to develop and started moving into that role with the Bills. It's true. I mean, there's guys like this around the league. Logan Thomas is a great example.
Just signed that extension.
Yep. And good for him, right? I mean, that's great. I mean, he took the long road for sure. I mean, he was a quarterback in college, converted to tight end, was with the Bills, never really got a great chance to really be the guy. And it's funny you think about it, because like the Bills are a team who's, let's be real, for the last 20-ish years have never really been truly above average or elite at the tight end position. So a guy like Logan Thomas, now looking back at it, like it's like kind of like the Wyatt Teller situation. You're like, man, wish we still had that guy. But you got to give credit to Washington's coaching staff as well, right? From a development standpoint, like they took what the Bills did and built on it to the point where he got to. So let's just not assume that he was going to be that with the Bills, right? We have to give the credit a little bit to that coaching staff as well.
And I mean, back to CR's comment for a second about Logan Thomas. I still remember this day. I believe it was Tyrod Taylor threw a fade to Logan Thomas in the end zone of one in the end, towards the end of the season, one of these years, or it might have even been Josh Allen. Someone was throwing a fade to Logan Thomas about 3 or 4 years ago. And Logan Thomas, went up, ball was right in his hands. He jumped up to go get it, and he couldn't bring it down. And I just screamed at my TV like, that's it. I'm done. Like cut his ass. I'm done with it. I'm done with Logan Thomas. And sure enough, that offseason, the Buffalo Bills cut him loose. They said, listen, just not willing to develop this guy any longer. We got to move on. We tried. The guy's got a ceiling, this, et cetera, et cetera. What happens? He goes to Washington, and then it finally clicks. So if you're a fan of Dawson Knox, that's the kind of thing that you're holding on to with Dawson Knox is, man, I really don't want to cut this dude loose. I don't want to give up on this dude and then have him click in his next stop, right?
You don't want to see that.
You don't want to see that. That's what really sticks with you. But then on the other side of that, Pierre comes in with another great comment. Like, hey, let's be real. Knox may just not have any hands. There's a reason Ole Miss didn't utilize him. Bean loves his big upside guys. Maybe Knox is just one of those guys who missed. So that's the other side of the argument too. So tons of different ways you can go there at tight end. One last thing on tight ends, we talk about what role, defining the potential roles. It appears like Dawson Knox will be that TE1, even though the tight end plays a smaller-ish role on this offense than maybe some other offenses. Hollister could slide in there if Dawson Knox catches the dropsies. We talked about how maybe Sweeney could slide in there. What about the potential of somebody off the roster sliding into by the end of the season a role on this team at the tight end position?
Well, I mean, you and I both talked about, and Kendall as well has said, when it comes to cut down day, oh my God, I can't. This is like, it's like getting to the Duke Williams, Christian Wade level with Zach Ertz. Really though, Damn it. Okay, so let me reset here. We talked about what's a position that come cut down day across the NFL, the Bills may be saying, oh, what's going on over there? What's going on over here? Tight end, right, is a position that we thought could be an option for them come cut down day to scour the trash heap of other teams. And I say that a little bit sarcastically because, there's the old saying, one man's trash is another's treasure. Maybe we find a tight end that gets cut and bring him in. And Pierre, God, man, I'll tell you what, Pierre, we need to make some kind of wager. Like by the time I come up there, what is it, the 28th?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we don't have Zach Ertz on the roster by then, we gotta make some kind of bet. Like I get something for that. Glenn comes in, says, please watch Knox highlights and see how aggressive he is when he has the ball. He trucks people. He needs to find chemistry with Josh because honestly, he's been overthrown a bit.
Every once in a while, and this is with every quarterback, there's a throw to a certain player that, in reality, it's the NFL. They should catch it, but it wasn't the most perfect throw in the world, et cetera, et cetera. That does happen to Dawson Knox a lot, but that's what the elite players do. Like Stephon Diggs. How many times did Josh Allen not throw the greatest pass in the world to Stephon Diggs this year? And he just caught it and did his thing. So, that's, I think, ultimately what the Buffalo Bills are looking for with a guy like Zach Ertz. Go make that difficult catch. We can find anybody to work the middle of the field, catch the ball, and then drop down. Like they can find anyone to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just did. Jacob Hollister. They got him on the street for like 1 year, $1 million.
And I'm not
in the 7th round, and Tommy Sweeney who can do it. They expect more from Zach Ertz.
I mean, the first part of that comment's right.
From Zach Ertz from Dawson Knox.
Yeah,
damn you.
Now you subliminally, you're now like on the Zach Ertz train. But I agree with the first part of that comment. Like when he has the ball in his hands, he does truck people. But I think most of that in his hands are the issue, right? Like it's like get the ball in his hands, and I think that's what the Bills. You saw them try to do that with a few tight end screens and things like that to try to make it easier on him. But like you said, elite players, it doesn't matter where the ball's thrown. If it's in the vicinity, they're going to come down with it. There are going to be overthrows to everybody, but not every ball is going to be perfectly on target. And you have to adjust. And if you're an elite player on the receiving end, you do adjust. Beasley does it. Diggs does it. Even Gabriel Davis, to an extent, did it last year. We know Sanders will be able to do that. So Diggs and Beasley are two of the best probably in the league at doing that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's definitely something that, we can't put that all, like the drops are there. We can't say it's all because Josh overthrowing.
All right, let's transition now to the running back room. And to me, there are two scenarios that could play out at running back this year in terms of defining the roles for the potential players. Brian Dable talked about like whoever is, the hottest, they're going to ride with that person. So you could see a situation like last year, the Singletary Moss splits when they both played together were very even. Both were usually within 3-4 carries of each other. I think you could see a difference this year, or if one of the guys gets on a heater, you see like a 15-5 instead of like an 8-8 or something of that nature, where they truly do ride one guy as opposed to mixing it up in two. So that could be a scenario you see. Another scenario you could see is the same thing as last year with two guys and the third guy being like a Tywan Jones. And then there's a fourth guy who's inactive every week. That's something you could see. And then I laid out a scenario last week or last show where I said, could it be Singletary and Moss are duking it out every week in practice, and one of those two then gets to be the 1-2 punch with a Matt Breida, as opposed to being Matt Breida being the this team's version of TJ Yeldon. So those are three of, I think, the most plausible scenarios. So my question to you is there room on this active roster for three legitimate running backs? I'm not talking the Tywan Joneses of the world who's going to play gunner. Is there room for Singletary, Moss, and Breida on game day?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's room for it. Will they do it? I would like to think they would do it in certain situations. Buff Area says Matt Breida's speed is something we lacked last season. Now, again, Breida, was cut by the Dolphins. He's got the speed element. We know that. It's one of those things where, is he really going to be the guy that we hope he can be for that speed element, or is he going to be the guy that really is just more of a practice type player where, yeah, he looks good in practice, he looks good in shorts running, but when it comes to game day, it's like he's not really going to contribute much.
Here's an
Breda has
interesting
been
one. I have
practice
not
on
seen
it.
this yet.
I will say this: Breda, he should get some run in the preseason as well, right? So I am going to be very focused on what he does in the preseason. I do think there is room for 3 of them on game day. I do. I think that it could be week specific, depending on who we're playing, depending on what kind of game plan we want to utilize. And Nick says felt like we never utilized Yeldon when we had him, but I also think that Yeldon, he was like a security blanket, I think, for the roster, right? He could run a little. He was obviously a good pass catcher. He could pass protect. He was a contingency, right? If something were to happen to Moss or Singletary. Breda is a little bit different, right? He's got more upside. He's got more speed. He brings something different to the table. So then in those situations, yeah, you could see maybe a guy like that being active on game day. He's still got to make the team, which I think he probably will. But yeah, I think there's room.
Because I was just about to say, we had a player on the roster the last 2 years in TJ Yeldon who wasn't as good as Matt Breda, flashed and didn't get an opportunity. So why should we expect a player who's better in Matt Breda to get more of an opportunity? But you just hit the nail on the head there, right? Because he's a better player, because he's got that higher ceiling. So I think you answered that question for me there. So the running back room should be really interesting. Elliot Iser comes in and says his surprise in the running back room is Antonio Williams, who he thinks is greater than Taiwan Jones. Williams, and I would agree, as a running back, Antonio Williams is better than Taiwan Jones. Most individuals on the planet, I think, are better running backs than Taiwan Jones. I hate special teams only players. I'm salty. Williams slides to special teams and has more vital role as a backup running back in case of injury. In a perfect world, that makes sense. But to me, Antonio Williams would fill more of the role of a linebacker or the Reggie Gilliam or a tight end plays in the special teams units. I don't think, at least to my knowledge, I don't think Antonio Williams is a gunner, which is the role that Taiwan Jones plays on special teams. So on special teams, those two guys play a different role, which is why Matt Breda, who Kendall was mentioning here, is getting some run at gunner in practice, because you need gunner in practice, because as a gunner you need that speed. And Breda, I think on the Madden ratings, because those are the most official things in the world, is one of the faster running backs.
Well, that could mean Taiwan. I mean, as much as they just hyped up Taiwan Jones, that could potentially put his roster spot in jeopardy. Although, I mean, it doesn't look likely just because of how much they really just praised him in the last couple days. But if he can fill that role, then maybe Taiwan Jones' roster spot becomes expendable, and you get a 2-for-1 with Breda.
That bowling ball running at you, Mike Tolbert Jr. coming at you on special teams, that would that would be something. All right, let's transition now to the quarterback position, because I was watching Bill's Focus with Mike Catalana and Dan Fetz, and they were talking about Jake Fromm, and we did these 53-man roster projections a couple of shows ago, 3 or 4 shows ago. You had Jake Fromm off the roster. I had Jake Fromm as the third quarterback. My reasoning being is if he shows up and plays well, he was a 5th-round pick. You don't want to lose him. He's a rookie with term, a guy with term, having been a rookie draft pick, et cetera, et cetera. But all reports out of camp is he's had like one good day or maybe 2 good days out of all the practices. He's looked really, really bad. And Dan Fetz on that Bill's Focus episode said it looks like Jake Fromm is battling Davis Webb for a practice squad spot. It really doesn't look to him as an outside observer like Jake Fromm is much of anything. What are your thoughts on Jake Fromm, supposedly, according to most observers, sputtering out at the Buffalo Bills training camp here?
What's our favorite term? He's looking like hot ass.
Hot ass.
I'm not surprised. I mean, look, this happens all the time with these quarterbacks coming out of the SEC. And I know it happens with a lot of the conferences, but the SEC gets hyped up every year. They have the best conference in college football. They get all these quarterbacks that come up that put up good numbers in college. And Jake Fromm has a good head on his shoulders when it comes to being in the pocket, but he doesn't have the arm talent. He doesn't have the mobility. and he doesn't have the physical gifts of a guy like Josh Allen or Mitch Trubisky. So to me, if he's not playing well to his strengths, which is like ball placement, poise, these types of things, there's not room for him on the team. Practice squad, sure. Like if you think you can slide Jake Fromm on the practice squad, because by the way, he fell to the 5th round in the draft anyway, so maybe teams were not so interested in him to begin with, and he plays okay in the preseason, enough to maybe say like, yeah, we'll keep him around and see what happens with another year. I'll just ask this question. Who would feel comfortable right now, Jake Fromm coming in and having to start a game for this team? Like no one, right? No one would feel comfortable with that. And I know right now he'd be kind of the 3rd string, and we're talking maybe future he could be the 2nd string, but you can find, in my opinion, you can find another guy that's like Jake Fromm. There's nothing special physically about him, maybe mentally fine. I know I'm kind of being hard on him, but I also kind of want my prediction to come true that he doesn't make it.
I mean, and just how deep this roster is too. Like once we bring Kendall on in a second, we're going to be talking about guys like Daryl Johnson and guys like Justin Zimmer. Like do you really want to lose Justin Zimmer to keep Jake Fromm? Like, do you really want to lose Daryl Johnson to keep Jake Fromm? Like some of these guys towards the back half of the roster. I just see more potential in those guys. And Elliott comes in. This is the last thing we'll do before we bring Kendall in. Elliott comes in, and you hit the nail on the head too. Like anyone who wants to trade Mitch Trubisky right now is crazy. Unless someone offers like a 1st round pick, like I want that dude as my backup quarterback. Elliott comes in and says, send Jake Fromm back to Georgia. The Falcons can groom him. I think their backup is like AJ McCarron right now. They did not invest in a quarterback in the draft, despite having Matt Ryan. But I will say this. I don't know if the state of Georgia wants him back, because it's because of Jake Fromm that Justin Fields transferred. They chose Jake Fromm over Justin Fields. So I don't know if the state of Georgia really wants him back. So let's bring on now, Kendall, as we transition now into the back half of the show. So if you guys have any questions, anything you want to talk about, let us know. And we're going to get Kendall's thoughts here on maybe some offensive roles, some things that we've talked about today. So while the people in the comment section accumulate some topics or things you want to talk about, Kendall, what were your thoughts on some of the roles that we projected for some of these players?
I mean, I think a lot of them are fair. A lot of this really boils down to what the hell's going on with Jake Kumerow. A lot of us don't really know exactly what's going to happen, but, we're all happy to hear that he's doing well. I think, people like McKenzie, we expected him to be the front runner for the return job. We just didn't know how well he was going to do. So it's reassuring to hear that he's doing well and he's going to win that job, at least according to reports at this point. So that's all reassuring and great. But I think we, for the most part, expected that. The Dawson Knox stuff is definitely disappointing. What Pierre said about his lack of use at Ole Miss, I would like to put that could be about DK Metcalf and AJ Brown being on Ole Miss at the same time. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't throw to my tight end if I had 2 wide receivers like that. But he has had a case of the dropsies or the yips. I know we're not supposed to say the yips, but he's got the yips. Not fair.
Do you have an early released lawnmower 4.0?
It's funny because I have a 3.0, but I do not have the 4.0. And then Elliot actually said my thing about Jake Fromm specifically. He said, yeah, give him back to the state of Georgia. I'm pretty sure I wrote that in like my article in March about how the Bills should trade Jake Fromm to the Falcons. Yeah, I'm looking at their backups. It's AJ McCarron and Felipe Franks. I know, right? Ooh. But really, no, seriously, at this point, like,
put some respect on Matt Ryan's name. He's still a good quarterback.
Matt Ryan is still good, but they're gonna have to turn the page at some point.
Harold, they will. Where you saw that footage of Breda playing Gunner?
What about it? Where did I find it?
Yeah, where did you see that footage?
I saw it on Twitter. I want to say it was from Saturday. Okay, I could be making that up. Practice. Yeah, but I definitely saw a clip of him practicing special teams reps, like 110% against 2 guys, and that doesn't happen. Like, you don't just practice against 2 guys and like getting an outside release against 2 guys by accident. That's a gunner rep.
Sorry, Don. So yeah, that happened. Talk about your Arkansas boy there and Felipe Franks.
But yeah, back to Kumerow. Like, I wanted to ask you guys about it specifically because he is becoming the 2021 Buffalo Bills preseason darling. Like it's happening. Not to say it's not deserved, like he is doing very well. But do you think it's a little different this time? But I'll throw the caveat in there. Just because it's different, does it mean that he's going to be anything more than wide receiver 5 on the depth chart?
Yeah, like he is better than the Brandon Rileys and the Derrick Rogers and the Des Lewis of the world, because like he's legitimately done it in this league. Like he's done things. I guess it's comparable to Rod Streeter. Like Rod Streeter put up some numbers in San Francisco before he came here. And honestly, Rod Streeter probably could have been something on this team had it not been for that horrible injury that preseason. So, I think he's the most real of sort of these training camp darlings since Rod Streeter, because like I said, he has done it in this league.
Sorry, I had to put this up there. You're absolutely right about Rod Streeter, though. It's very similar. Like he has some production, not like great production, but like he's been in the league more than Isaiah Hodgins, so you at least like that. But I feel like a lot of us, it's a split camp. There's people who are like, the unknown, the potential that is Isaiah Hodgins versus someone that's proven at least to an extent in the NFL.
Twist in the knife. Oof. Should I even read this comment for those listening in the podcast version?
You have to.
Breda wouldn't have dropped the pass in the championship game. Oof. All right. Elliot went there. Yeah, all right. So a couple of things that I want to talk about before we close out the show here, and some things I want to throw by both of you guys. And I wanted Kendall on when we talked about this because I wanted some multiple perspectives on it. Let's start with the offensive line. So at least in the screenshot I saw on Saturday, and again, the preseason will clear up a lot of this, and I just can't freaking wait for actual games to be played so the Bills can stop hiding some of these things because it's getting ridiculous not knowing where guys are lining up in practice. But you have, it seemed like left to right, they were lining up Spencer Brown, John Feliciano, Mitch Morse, Cody Ford, Darrell Williams. That's what it looked like in the screenshots that I saw from Saturday's practice. In that scenario, you have Cody Ford at right guard and you have John Feliciano at left guard. And it got me thinking, Forrest Lamp to me is a left guard. I don't know if he has, again, preseason will tell if Forrest Lamp has that flex to move over to right guard. I don't think I've ever seen a scenario where Forrest Lamp has played right guard. Ike Butker, another guy. We've only ever really seen him play left guard and center. Like the only time we ever saw Ike Butker playing something like right guard was when he was like the third string player on the Buffalo Bills offensive line. And we were saying, why do they love this guy so much? Cut him. Most of his success has come at left guard. So I'm sitting there thinking like, who's the backup right guard? Could someone have a chance to make this team that we're not talking about? Obviously, Ryan Bates comes to mind. Jameel Douglas. Could Jameel Douglas be a player? Has played at guard in Tennessee. Could Jameel Douglas be a guy that maybe we're not talking about? This guy was a shot to make the roster.
I don't think so. I'll put my 2 points in on this. First one is I don't feel the same way about Butker. Obviously, the snaps he gave to us last year were primarily at left guard, but I see him as someone that can contribute at left, center, and right, albeit it might be best at left guard. But what I really want to say, which I think would make my point, is, this is it exactly. If Ford goes down, Feliciano can go to right guard, Lamp can go to left guard. If Feliciano goes down, Ford can go to left guard, or it doesn't even need to happen. Ford can stay, then Lamp can just fill right in, or Butker can just fill right in. So because Ford and Feliciano have the flexibility to play left and right, you don't necessarily need a backup for right guard because whoever gets injured, hopefully it's not both at once, then the other can just move over or vice versa, and then someone just plugs in at left guard.
Has it been interesting to you guys too? Like, we signed Bobby Hart. We drafted Cyrus Tuatele, who in his scouting report, most people said like, hey, this kid's got some potential in the future if you kick him inside. Every single free agent we sign, whether it's the two guys that we just signed, I'm blanking on both of their names. Wow. But even the last three guys that we've signed, they're all guards. We're just signing guard after guard after guard. There's just a gluttony of guards on this team. Like, I'm really interested in seeing who the hell is playing tackle when the preseason starts. Like, is this a situation where the Bills just want to give Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle like every single rep on every single team to get these guys acclimated as quickly as possible? I don't know, Dave. What do you think about the lack of tackles on the roster? It's kind of shocking to me.
It is
true tackles.
It is, but I'll try to make the argument for why it is. You drafted obviously Brown and Doyle. Brown was obviously pegged as the backup swing tackle by Bean. You got Dawkins and Williams already. Bates can play a little tackle if need be. I think with guard, we talked about this all throughout the offseason. Like there was uncertainty at the guard position. And so what they're doing is they're just throwing numbers at the guard position, adding more names to the competition, adding more guys to the mix, whether it's even for first or second or third or even below. If they're second string battle, third string battle, like doesn't matter, right? They're throwing bodies at the guard position to try to create these battles, these competitions to really have the cream rise to the top. And this is kind of what Bean did when he tried to overhaul the offensive line the first time around. If you remember, when we had to get rid of guys like Bodine and we had to get rid of guys like Vlad Dukas, right? Like we had to just like throw bodies in the mix for the competition and just see kind of what happened. And that's ultimately how we got a guy like Feliciano to rise to the top and earn a starting role. And I think that's kind of the approach they're taking now with the interior, right? Like Ford has, by all accounts, played all right, pretty well so far in camp. They gave Feliciano that money, but I still think they're saying like, look, we are not necessarily satisfied with what we have here on the interior. We're good with what we got at tackle. We know our starters. We drafted Brown to be the swing, and we even made another investment in Tommy Doyle as well. So that's how I see it. And I think that they're just trying to create competition. Honestly, that's what I think.
And worst case scenario too, because these situations, I always try to think about these situations when I look at the depth chart. That's just how my mind works. So again, knock on wood. If there was a situation where both of our tackles went down, like Dion went down and Daryl went down, that's a situation where Spencer Brown goes to left tackle and you probably kick Cody Ford to right tackle, right? Like
maybe.
So Cody Ford still does have that versatility.
Yep. And Bean mentioned that too. I mean, he said that like a couple days ago, right?
Yeah. And all three guys that Buff Barrier just mentioned, I think that the last one, Caleb Beninoch has tackle flex, but all of these guys are primarily guards. So that was the comment that I'm making. It's just like guard after guard after guard. But Harold Fuller comes in and says, any word on Dawkins' health? So the reports came out that Dawkins and Butker went onto the COVID list. Then the reports came out that one was symptomatic and the other was asymptomatic. The fact that Butker's already back at practice tells us that Butker's probably the one who was asymptomatic. The fact that Dawkins is out tells us that he's probably the one, even though they didn't divulge this information, he's probably the one who is symptomatic. But he has been on Twitter. He has been saying that he'll be back, blah, 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 better than ever, all these things. Let's hope that whatever, he's dealing with in COVID doesn't stick with him long-term. My guess is you probably don't see him at all in the preseason. Maybe you see him in like that third game for a series or whatever. But you'll probably have him back by the regular season. But also there's just so many question marks with COVID. You just never know. Like sometimes it just sticks with people for months and months and months. And for other people, it's gone in a week. So it'll be really, really interesting to see. But I wouldn't hit the panic button on a guy like Dion Dawkins yet. I'm sure he'll be back. Pretty sure he'll be back for the regular season. All right. We've talked all offense on this show. So I want to switch it over to the defense a little bit. And again, my mind was racing today when Heath Farwell started talking about Daryl Johnson and how great and how freaky he is of a special teams player. And he started talking about, Daryl Johnson's role in this football team. And it got me thinking, like, how can we keep 7 defensive ends? Like, how can we do it? Like, how can we justify it? And I came up with a couple of different scenarios here. The one is it's been awfully quiet on the defensive tackle front. Ed Oliver, haven't heard much of. Starlo DeLele, haven't heard much of. Elliot. From what I've heard, Phillips has looked like meh. And Zimmer has looked a lot better, and the coaching staff actually trusts Zimmer more. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came down to Zimmer or Phillips. They look to trade a guy like Harrison Phillips, and I'll get you guys' thought on that in a little bit. Butler's been quiet. Could there be a scenario? Here's scenario number 1. Buffalo keeps 3 pure defensive tackles in Oliver, Lodolele, and either Zimmer or Phillips. I'm going to go with Zimmer in this scenario. Then they keep those 7 defensive ends for a total of 10 defensive linemen on the roster. That then leaves you with F.A. Obata, Gregory Rousseau, and Carlos Basham to mix it up inside to fill in for the fact that we only have 3 defensive tackles. I want your guys' thoughts on that scenario first. We keep the 10 D linemen, but go with 7 ends and 3 D tackles. Something that we've talked about on this show, and Matt Perino sort of put it into the Twitter sphere this afternoon as well. What are your thoughts, Dave?
I like it from the sense of that I think you're keeping the better players overall in that scenario. Like, you're not just keeping a guy because he plays a certain position, even though he may be a lesser player. It's like kind of like the quarterback situation, right? Like, you're going to keep Fromm as a third quarterback when there's another guy at another position who's a better player, right? So if you do that, if you have that scenario with the 3, Star being back is critical, right? Because that was the one, I would say, thing that kind of set the tone for the entire defensive line last year, missing the pure one tech. Now, you are going to be kind of risking that a little bit if something were to happen to him, although then I guess you're not in any worse a situation than you were last year. You're just super thin with the big guys. But if the Bills do want to shift to more of this sort of like NASCAR hybrid type of line where you kind of have these guys that can move from the outside in, like a Basham, like a Rousseau, like an Obata, I do think that this is a way for you to keep the best players on the team. The only concern I would have is some of the comments being made about how they got kind of outmatched in that Chiefs game, the AFC Championship game last year, because they were lacking size on their defensive line. So that's the one comment that I kind of keep sticking with. And again, we're just kind of trying to piece things together at this point without having seen a preseason or anything like that. That comment kind of sticks out to me. It leads me to believe that he'd like to keep some beef on that line. And maybe in his mind, Obata is that guy, right? Like, I don't know, but that's the thing that kind of just keeps kind of coming back to me. Yeah, I know. Don't. Like, there were a lot of guys that were
there's
there.
a lot of names. There's a lot of names.
Like, it's not even just Alim. There's like Melifonwu. I mean, like, I don't even want to get into it. Like, just, but anyway, that's my take on the D line.
Yeah, a ton of good comments here. Richard comes in and says, you can't read into not hearing things about defensive tackles. They make impacts that aren't talked about. That is also true. Carl comes in and talks about, is there any news on Basham's weight? I haven't heard anything. He looks slim-ish. I don't want to say he looks small, but he doesn't look like he has that baby fat that maybe you saw his senior year at Wake Forest. He looks like he might be down to junior season Wake Forest.
I was hoping that'd be his nickname this year too.
Fat
Boogie.
Baby Fat Basham. I think Baby Fat Basham is better than Boogie Basham.
Unbelievable.
No. Sorry. Let me go back. I'm not saying Baby Fat Basham is a better nickname than Boogie Basham. I think Baby Fat Basham rolls off the tongue.
Wait.
And Baby
we
Fat
have
Boogie.
We have Big Baller Bean, Triple B. What if we go Quadruple B? Baby Fat. Oh wait, no, that's not gonna work.
Yeah,
that's
it doesn't
only
work.
3 Bs. Damn, I was gonna say Baby Fat Boogie Basham, but that's
BFBB.
Yeah. Hey, yeah.
All right.
We tried.
Anyway.
The next scenario I want to run by you guys in order to try to sneak 7 defensive ends onto this roster. In this scenario, we keep 4 defensive tackles. So Harrison Phillips and Zimmer are safe, or maybe even throw Vernon Butler in there if you're a masochist. You can throw 4 defensive tackles in there.
This guy knows what he's talking about.
And in this scenario, and there are some people in the comment section who I know are not going to like this. In this scenario, you slim down at linebacker and go from 6 to 5, and Daryl Johnson is your de facto 6th linebacker because he plays a special teams role that is typically held by a linebacker.
Yeah.
What do you?
I can get behind that idea for sure. I can get behind that. The Bills are past the point where they need like these special teams only linebackers, right? They've got a guy like Tyrell Adams who can play defense and special teams. They got Matakevich. So
who apparently they like as a linebacker as well. I've heard some reports about that, not just special teams.
Yeah, that and Dodson they kind of talked up a little bit as well. So like if there's going to be an odd man out there, it's like, okay, keep Dodson or Adams and keep Matakevich. And then your choice is, do I keep Daryl Johnson or do I keep a guy like Dodson or Tyrell Adams, right? Like,
and
so
Joe Giles Harris entered the equation today.
Yeah, your guy. You have mentioned him all along. I will say
I've mentioned literally every player on this roster.
but the decision basically comes down to Daryl Johnson or a guy like Tyrell Adams / Dodson, right? So
try to get this one. We got Carl coming in, and Carl finally, like, he's one of the 6 linebacker guys, but he has no problem with that scenario.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's fine.
Yeah. I think it makes more sense than it's very counterintuitive to say that I want 10 or 11 defensive linemen, but for whatever reason I would rather that than 10. I don't know why. I need 4 defensive tackles, even though I know that a Russo, a Basham, Obata can be rotated down inside. Yeah. I don't want to have one tech on this roster. If it means getting rid of Phillips, I just don't feel great about it, especially knowing that Starr could be out the door after this year. I would like to have some semblance and solvency for the future of the one tech position.
Good. And this is where things get tricky too. If you're the Buffalo Bills, like I said, I wish the NFL would just save us all the heartache and would just make it like a 60-man roster or a 65-man roster. That would solve all of our problems. But Buff Barrier comes in and says McDermott likes Andre Smith too. The Buffalo Bills traded a 7th round pick for Andre Smith. Like the Buffalo Bills traded
re-signed him this offseason too.
Re-signed him this offseason to a contract. Like, the Buffalo Bills like Andre Smith too. So like his name also needs to be in the equation. Now, we've had conversations about Andre Smith on the show previous, and our issue is that he is a special teams only player, but that doesn't necessarily need to be the case because there is something to be said about development. He could eventually develop into more than that, but he's not there yet. So, that's another tricky one too. It's going to be some really tough decisions, and the preseason is going to say have a lot to do with what these decisions are.
What I will say about Andre Smith is I do remember him playing fairly well when he got some defensive snaps in the Week 17 game. The one caveat to that is everyone on our defense played well in that Week 17 game.
Everyone on our team played well that game.
Yeah, so it's kind of like tough to single him out and be like, yeah, he looked really good playing his 111th. But no, I did think he was all right in that game. So I might want to look back at that Week 17 game for Andre Smith.
We got Jeff King coming in here saying with a super chat. Always appreciate you, Jeff. He says, guys, always appreciate the content and keep hearing great things about F.A. Obata. What's your take on this? Stay or go? Again, thank you for, thanks. Thank you to all of you. Sorry, I don't know how to read today. I'm with you. And that's why we sort of had this discussion. Like, how do we fit 11 defensive linemen onto this team? How do we fit 7 defensive ends onto this team? Like, this is a conversation we're going to have again and again and again until August 31st, because a lot of these guys are flashing. And F.A. Obata is one of those guys with the inside flex that might allow us to keep 3 defensive tackles. But what do you want to say, Dave?
I was going to say, isn't it funny how like we've like moved on past like the 9 defensive linemen? Now
that's what's so funny.
It's got to be 10
or 11. It's got to be 11.
That's why I was saying it's counterintuitive of me to say I want 11, even though we were kind of fixated on 9 before. I rather have 11 than 10.
I've always been a 10. I've always been a 10 guy.
I was too, but I don't want to keep 3. Like, our strength is our defensive end group, not our defensive tackle group. So now I'm like pigeonholed into 11.
Just call Daryl Johnson an outside linebacker, and then just relabel it.
Fine. Yeah, it just makes us feel better knowing that there's only 10.
As Chris Jenke would say, just make Justin Zimmer a fullback. Just make Justin Zimmer a fullback.
Yeah, I saw someone say tight end too.
Yeah,
he'll do it all. He'll make this team.
All right, so I'm officially out of show notes here. So I don't know if there's anything you guys want to talk about at this part of the evening. Kendall, anything you want to throw out there? Comment section. Anything you guys want to throw out there? Randy made a comment earlier. What did he say? Oh, he talked about Tommy Doyle. Sorry, Carl was talking about Tommy Doyle.
Playing guard, right?
He made a comment, and I've heard this from a couple of people, like during draft season and stuff. Like, if Tommy Doyle can't get that outside speed fixed, can he kick inside to guard with how big he is? I think it's possible in Buffalo for a guy like Tommy Doyle to eventually kick inside to guard. They're going to start him at tackle. They're going to do everything they can to make him a tackle. But if it doesn't work out, I can see them kicking him inside to guard. It wouldn't work for the Arizona Cardinals because Kyler Murray's 6 foot. It would work for a lot of football teams if your quarterback is shorter. But a quarterback like Josh Allen, who's 6'5", 6'6" in cleats, I think that Tommy Doyle could work as a guard in an offense with a quarterback like Josh Allen.
I mean, I'm not against experimenting with it. I mean, the history would tell you it's probably not. It's not the most likely thing to succeed. But again, the NFL's evolved. Maybe in this day and age, something like that could work. Like, you don't know until you try. And if he really doesn't pan out, they'll probably at least try to move him inside the guard before they make the decision whether or not to just cut bait with him. Because I think he was a fifth rounder.
Yep.
So it's not like, a year or two down the road, if they feel like he's not cutting it, they'll be afraid to cut him. I mean, we saw them cut Voshon Joseph, short while ago. I think he was a fifth rounder as well, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, they'll try. But
Voshon Joseph was one of those guys that Sean McDermott brought into his office and like took a sledgehammer to his like
they did to Hodgins.
Yeah, the Tanya Harding treatment.
Yeah, to get him onto IR instead of waiving him.
It's apparently the new thing. What I will say about Tommy Doyle, real quickly, what I will say about the whole situation is like more just I'll believe it when I see it. Like, I'd love to hear that he has that kind of flexibility. I'm just not going to believe it until I see it. And I think that's what you said a couple months back with this rumor, Judge. I think that was you. And
then Truth to Heart's coming in saying, if Basham is the boogeyman, can Rousseau be the stripper pole? I don't really understand that. Like, is it like, I don't understand. But here's what I'm going to say. If Gregory Rousseau gets a lot of strip sacks and he's like tall and skinny like a pole, the stripper pole makes sense, but also that seems like a terrible nickname. No offense.
Yeah, I don't think you want to be
called a stripper pole.
I wouldn't want that. No.
I don't think so.
Buff Barrier coming in. He says Tariq Thompson has had a nice camp so far at safety, 2 picks so far in 11v11. Obviously, we can't speak to that. I haven't read that anywhere, but Buff Barrier says that he's been in some of the attendance. But DeMar Hamlin had a pick the other day. We got the reports here, obviously, that Tariq Thompson is doing some things. That safeties, those 2 backup safety spots are up for grabs. Like DeMar Hamlin, 6th-round pick, Tariq Thompson, UDFA, Josh Thomas from Appalachian State, UDFA, and then obviously Jaquan Johnson was a 6th-round pick as well. Like, none of those jobs are guaranteed to anybody. It is legitimately up for grabs. Those 4 spots.
No, it's guaranteed. Tariq Thompson is getting it. It's guaranteed. I'm standing this, and I will die on this hill.
That's
Tariq
another thing.
Tariq and DeMar over Jaquan and Josh.
That's another thing where it'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it will.
What goes on in the preseason.
Yeah.
And then what Pierre came in with a comment. What did Pierre have to say? Well, Carl said, Judge, the Boogeyman was a pro wrestler too, with a really creepy entrance. But was there a pro wrestler called the stripper pole?
Is this the
it's not very marketable.
Yeah. Maybe there was a slip of the tongue and Heath Farwell did. I mean, Daryl Johnson probably would be a linebacker in a 34. So, I mean, it makes sense. Yeah.
I am against it. I said it during the draft. We all wanted a guard during the draft, and the knee-jerk reation was like, "Oh, can he play guard?" And I was like, "No, he's never played guard."
All I'm going to say, all I'm going to say is that after the draft, I set up my Bills roster on Madden, and by 2023, my offensive line left to right was Deion Dawkins, Cody Ford, Jack Anderson, Tommy Doyle, and Spencer Brown, and it was a pretty good offensive line for me.
Yeah, we all know how realistic Madden is too. So
listen, that's all I'm going to say. Pierre wants us to talk about the NASCAR package a little more. Seeing the picture of Rousseau, Basham, Oliver, Epinesa was exciting to see, and that's I think the biggest part of camp for me.
That's obviously the big right there.
Everything they're talking, everyone's talking about Kumerow, and everyone's talking about McKenzie. Everyone's talking about how good Josh Allen has looked. The number one thing for me that has just been the most stress relieving this preseason or this training camp has been, according to reports, how good the edge rushers have looked, right? Because that's the missing element on this defense. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, sideline to sideline linebackers who can make plays. Teron Johnson is a guy who showed he can make clutch interceptions at clutch times, and he can be a solid nickel corner when he's on his game, especially if he played like he did last season, the late last season. Trey White, all-pro corner. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer should be all-pro corners. Like, our secondary is legit. Our linebackers are legit. If the Buffalo Bills, even if they can't get their sack game up, can absolutely dominate the line of scrimmage and can wreak havoc on the quarterback and clog up those passing lanes and just cause that chaos, this secondary and these linebackers are going to eat. They're going to eat. And this is a team that, on top of having a really good offense, if we can turn the football over and have plus field position multiple times a game, like, well, look out. Like, maybe the loss of Andre Roberts this year can be supplemented in the field position game with a defense that turns the football over more.
I'd like to see more turnovers. That is, 100%. I definitely would like to see that. I felt like, although I think that's something we've been lacking on this defense, honestly. I mean, I don't know statistically where we were as far as takeaways last year. I'm sure we were decent in turnover margin, but I think in like just absolute terms, as far as takeaways, we probably weren't, I bet we were probably like middle of the road.
Got Jeff King coming in with another super chat. He says, got to run, guys. All my best to all of you. Let's go Buffalo. And thanks, Fanatics, for the best content as always. Fanatics is the best. As Conor McGregor would say, fook the rest. Be well, folks. Thank you so much, Jeff King. Always appreciate it. Carl comes in and says, you question the Bills sack game, Judge. That ain't right. Listen, I'm going to question it. I'm questioning it. So I'm hoping they can turn around this year. I think turnovers is the one thing that needs to change this year. Like, on top of sacks, it's been a while since what, 2017, since this defense has really taken the ball away. Like, turnovers was what broke the drought. Like, in reality, it was turnovers that broke the drought for us. Yeah. So that should be interesting. All right. Looking through the comment section, anything else that you guys see or anything else you guys want to talk about before we head on out of here?
I'm just looking at total takeaways from last season really quick, and it looks like the Bills were actually, wow, they were third in the NFL.
It says third, right, with 26 total turnovers, which is kind of shocking because it didn't feel that way last year. But
yeah, it definitely did not. It definitely did not.
Maybe the offense. I mean, the offenses were humming last year, so maybe there was just kind of a league-wide deflation in terms of defensive takeaways. So therefore,
I am surprised by that.
Pushed to the top. Yeah, I didn't say anything because I saw that and I was like, I'm not sure this is right. Am I reading these stats wrong? But no, yeah, you just affirmed me.
I've been fact checked, and I fact checked myself.
I want to feel like we're turning the ball over more.
Yeah, because I didn't feel that way last year.
Statistically,
I just want to have that feeling.
That feeling in my gut, you know?
Yeah, I like it.
All right, gents. Anything left? Yeah, I'd like to see. How about something we'd like to see? Because D. Hansen mentioned Ed Oliver here. Something we'd like to see in the coming weeks. Something that will make us feel good on the inside. And for me, it would see Ed Oliver having a good day, or Ed Oliver starting to flash that potential that we know he has, being a top 10 overall pick. What are some things that you guys would like to see as training camp and the preseason progress?
I want to see more of what I read today about Tremaine Edmonds and how he was making plays. I think with guys like Ed Oliver, like you said, Steve, if he's doing well, if Starr's back and he's doing what he's supposed to, it's Tremaine Edmonds has a chance to really shine. And all three of us on this show have been supporters of Edmonds. There's been a lot of detractors of his on social media and otherwise, and he's become kind of a polarizing figure in the Bills like fandom community and Bills content creation community. So for me, I'm rooting for a guy like Edmonds, and I'd like to see more reports like I saw today about positive things from him, because most of the reports so far have been about Rousseau or Kumerow or whatever, and like today we kind of got a nice little piece on Edmonds. So let's see some more of that.
Kendall, definitely agree with Oliver and Edmonds, but because they were taken, I'll go with something else. And we kind of talked about it today. The mediocre play from Harrison Phillips. I really want to hear that he's doing more than just looking good, like being a big body, putting bulk on his frame. I want to hear that he's actually playing well, and I want to hear that he's going to make this team, because I am concerned about the one tech position of the future, because I do like what Star provides this year, but I don't know what it's going to look like in 2022. So I want to have some security, and hopefully that security is Harrison Phillips. So I'd like to hear some positive.
He would need a contract too, though, right? His contract's up.
He would, but I mean, I'd be okay with taking the dead cap on Star next year and unfortunately doubling down on that and applying it to Harrison. But obviously that relies on Harrison. He needs to play well enough to merit that contract. So I just want to have some semblance of security.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the one last thing that I want to see as well, I want to see Isaiah Hodgins step up in the preseason and go absolutely off.
That's a good one.
And make it to the Buffalo
That's a
Bills
good one.
and cut him. So that's what I selfishly want to see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, it's been a pleasure as always. We will see you Monday, and go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
What up, Buffalo fanatics, Z-Bots, Z here with you live. No, not again. Come on. Man, every time I go live, my internet lags out. What's this? Z-Bot, you got to start using NordVPN for your streams. It will help speed up your internet. 2-year plan is 70% off at the bfvpn.com, and you get your first month free. Kingpin knows best. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Z-Bot back with you with better than ever internet connection thanks to NordVPN. The best live streams use the best internet connection. Visit the bfpn.com to take advantage of 70% off a 2-year plan with your first month free.